The family budget had always been a source of tension for her. But what happened this time crossed all boundaries. Her husband earned $3,000 a month, but when she asked for money for the child's food, she heard an indignant reply. Asking, "Your parents for money for the child's food. Are you sending me to humiliate myself when I earn $3,000? All his salary went to his mother-in-law, and he left his wife only $50 for the entire month. Hello, dear listeners. I am glad to welcome you to my channel. I present to you a new interesting story. Enjoy listening. Sarah noticed that her husband, Dan, had started transferring large sums of money in early fall. At first, she said, nothing, thinking he was building up savings, maybe for a vacation or home renovations. Sarah and Dan had been married for 4 years. Their daughter, Kira, had just turned 2. They lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, but it was their own. Dan worked at an IT company, earning around $3,000. Sarah was on maternity leave, working remotely as an engineer editor, making about $200 a month, no more. Previously, they had put their money into a joint account. Dan would transfer the main part of his salary there, and Sarah would add her earnings. From this pot, they paid for utilities, groceries, Kira's clothes, and household expenses. The remainder was saved. The system worked smoothly, without stress, but in September, something broke. First, Dan transferred not $1,500 to the PayPal joint account, as usual, but only $800. Sarah was surprised but figured a bonus was delayed or taxes were deducted. The next month it was $700, then $500, and in November, only $300. Dan, what's going on? She asked one evening when her husband was on his laptop. We agreed. On a budget. Everything's fine, he grumbled, not looking up from the screen. Just some expenses came up. What expenses? It's none of your business. Sarah was flustered. Dan had never responded like that. They always discussed major expenses, consulted each other. Now he was withdrawn, walled off. She tried to check his phone, wondering if he was cheating. She checked messengers, texts, nothing suspicious. But in the banking app, which he had accidentally left open, she saw a long list of transfers, all to one recipient, Laura Sherman, his mother. The amounts were substantial: $500, $700, $400, $800. In 3 months, it totaled over $3,000. Sarah stared at the screen, disbelieving her eyes. Laura Sherman worked as an accountant in some office and earned a decent salary. She lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment that her ex-husband had left her after their divorce. She had enough money. Why did she need transfers from her son? That evening, Sarah decided to talk to him directly. Dan, I saw your transfers to your mom. What happened? Does she need help? Dan looked up from his plate, his face tensed. She asked for help. She has expenses. What expenses amount to $3,000 in 3 months? What difference does it make to you? That's my mom. I have to help her. But we have a family. We have a child. Sarah's voice trembled. We barely make ends meet with $300 a month. Kira needs clothes, food, diapers, medicine. Manage it. You earn money. $200, Dan. That's enough for a week's groceries. Then spend less. Sarah felt a chill run through her. Her husband looked at her indifferently, as if she were bothering him with a trivial request. Are you serious? She managed to say. Absolutely. Mom spent her whole life on me. Now it's my turn. The conversation ended nowhere. In December, things got really tight. Dan transferred only $50 to their joint account. $50 for the Ting's month. Sarah looked at the bank message and couldn't understand how they would had her live. Groceries for a week cost $80 to $90, diapers $15, utilities $60. Hey, $200 had already gone to pay for internet, phone, and baby items. She had to buy Kira a new jacket. She'd outgrown her old one. Dan, this is ridiculous, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice even. 50. For a month for 3 people. If you don't like it, go to work, he snapped, pulling on his jacket. I'm tired of supporting you. Supporting? I'm on maternity leave with your child. That's your choice. He slammed the door and left. Sarah sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. Kira was playing with toys on the rug, babbling something, in her own language. Sarah looked at her daughter and felt tears welling up. She tried to stretch the money, buying the cheapest items, cereals, pasta, eggs. She gave up meat and fruits. She tried to give Kira at least something decent. Cottage cheese, baby purees, but by the end of the second week, there was no money left at all. Sarah sat in the kitchen, looking at the empty refrigerator. There was nothing for dinner. Kira had run out of baby food. Tomorrow, there would be nothing to feed the child. Dan returned late, walked past her, and took containers of food, clearly, from a restaurant, out of a bag. Where did you have dinner? Sarah asked. At Mom's. I see. And what are we supposed to eat? Look in the fridge. It's empty, Dan, completely empty. Tomorrow there's nothing to feed Kira. He shrugged, opening a container of pasta. Ask your parents. Sarah froze. What? Well, ask your parents for money. For food. Are you suggesting I go to my parents for money for my child's food? What's wrong with that? It's normal. Normal. Sarah's voice broke into a shout. You're sending me to humiliate myself when you earn $3,000. You're transferring all your money to your mother, and you're telling me to beg from mine? Don't yell. You'll wake the baby. Go to hell. Sarah grabbed his pasta container and threw it into the sink. Get out of here. Dan slowly stood up. His face turned white. Are you completely crazy? Go to your precious mommy. If she's more important to you than your family, live with her. He silently wiped his hands, grabbed his jacket and left. Sarah collapsed onto a chair and burst into tears. The next day, she called her mother, didn't explain the situation, just asked to borrow $150 for food and diapers. Her mother didn't ask anything, transferred the money within half an hour. Dan returned only after 3 days, came in, changed, and sat down at the computer. Sarah remained silent. She no longer wanted to talk to him, but a decision was brewing inside her. She started saving. Every free minute, she took on extra orders, edited articles, proofread texts, worked at night when Kira was asleep. In 3 weeks, she saved $400. Her mother transferred another $100 when Sarah told her about her plans. Leave him, her mother said. Immediately. I will, Sarah promised. She rented a parsonage, small apartment for a month, found it cheaply through acquaintances. She packed bags for herself and Kira, only the essentials. Documents, clothes, toys. She put everything in bags and hid them at a friend's place. And then she waited for the right moment. Dan, as usual, went to his mother's for dinner. Sarah saw him to the door. Enjoy your meal, she said in an even voice. He nodded and left. An hour later, Sarah picked up Kira, took the pre-packed bags from her friend, and drove to the rented apartment. She turned off her phone. In their shared apartment, she left a note on the table. Live with your mom, since she's more important to you than your family. We won't humiliate ourselves anymore. Dan returned home around 10 p.m., full and content, with a bag of pies from Laura Sherman. He entered the apartment, took off his shoes, and called out, Sarah, where are you? Silence. He went into the Dallin room. Empty. No baby toys on the rug. Kira's clothes were gone from the closet. Sarah's things too. A note on the table. Dan grabbed it, read it. His face fell. He rushed to his phone, dialed Sarah's number. She hung up. Again. Again. On the 5th try, she answered. What are you doing? Where are you? None of your business, Sarah answered calmly. How is it none of my business? You stole my daughter. I took my daughter. You forgot about her when you sent me to beg. Sarah, don't be silly. Come. Home. No, we're no longer a couple. You're crazy. You can't do this. I can, and I already did. She hung up. Dan called 10 more times. Sarah ignored all calls. Half an hour later, a message came from Laura Sherman. Sarah, Dan, told me everything. Don't act like a hysteric. Come home, we'll discuss everything. Sarah smirked and blocked her. Mother-in-law. The next day, Dan showed up at her parents' house. Sarah's mother met him at the doorstep, not even inviting him in. Where's Sarah? He demanded. None of your business. She's my wife, my daughter, your wife, whom you sent to ask us for money for food while you transferred hundreds of thousands to your mom. Sarah's mother looked at him with undisguised contempt. Get out of here, Dan. You've lost the right to call them yours. I'll sue. Go ahead. Explain to the judge why your child was starving while you fed your mommy. Dan turned and left. Sarah knew he would search, so for the first week, she stayed in the Matablé, rented apartment, not going out. She ordered groceries for delivery and worked remotely. Kira played, not understanding what was happening, but happy with her mom's constant presence. Dan wrote every day. First, he threatened, demanded she return, then tried to appeal to her pity, saying he missed her, wanted to see his daughter. Sarah didn't reply. 2 weeks later, he sent a message. Sarah, let's meet. Talk things through properly. She agreed. They met at a cafe. Dan looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, unshaven. Come back, he said without preamble. Forgive me, I understand. Everything now. What exactly do you understand, Dan? That you were wrong? That? You shouldn't have acted that way? Why did you act that way? He hesitated. Mom asked, said she needed money, that she had problems. What problems? I don't know. She didn't really explain, just asked me to transfer. And you transferred $3,000 in 3 months without even asking what for. She's my mother, and Kira is your daughter. Sarah's voice broke. She's 2 years old, Dan. She's been eating only porridge for weeks because there was no money for proper food. And you were sitting at your mommy's, devouring her meatballs and telling me to go beg? Dan lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. I don't care about your apologies. I want to know what's changed. Will you stop transferring money to her? He was silent. Answer me, Dan. She's my mother. I can't abandon her. So, you'll keep transferring? I'll help, but not as much. I'll give you more. Give us, Sarah scoffed, like a handout. No thank you. I don't need it. I'll manage on my own. She stood up and left the cafe. Dan rushed after her, grabbed her arm. Wait, let's resolve this properly. Sarah pulled her arm away. We already resolved it. 3 months ago, when you chose your mom over your family, she left without looking back. For the next few weeks, Dan called, texted, tried to contact her through mutual acquaintances. Laura Sherman also got involved, sending angry messages, accusing Sarah of destroying the family, of depriving her child of her father. Sarah remained silent. She hired a lawyer, filed for divorce and child support. Dan resisted, demanding to see his daughter. Sarah agreed, but only in the presence of third parties. For the first meeting, Dan came with toys and gifts. Kira was happy and ran to him. He hugged her, and Sarah saw tears well up in his eyes. But when Dan tried to persuade her to come back after the meeting, Sarah refused. It's too late, Dan. You made your choice. Now live with it. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Dan paid child support, 25% of his salary. It came out to $750 a month, plus Sarah's earnings. She found higher-paying editing jobs, started earning $400. She had enough money, more than enough. One day, 6 months after the divorce, Sarah met Dan on the street. He was walking with Laura Sherman. His Mother-in-law was saying something indignantly, waving her hands. Dan walked beside her, his face despondent, hunched over. Sarah walked past without greeting them. Sarah, Dan called out to her. She turned around. Laura Sherman gave her a disdainful look. How's Kira? Dan asked. Good. She's growing. Can I see her? Saturday, as usual. He nodded. Laura Sherman snorted and pulled her son's sleeve. Let's go. Nothing to talk about with her. They left. Sarah watched them go and suddenly felt not anger, not resentment, but pity. Dan chose his mother. Now he was with her. That evening, a former colleague of Dan's called her. Sarah, hey. Did you hear Dan moved in with his mom? He rented out your apartment, and now he lives with Laura Sherman. She keeps him on a leash, doesn't let him go anywhere. Work, home, work, home. He can't even have a Timon's beer with us. She calls immediately, demanding he come back. They say he's completely deflated. Sarah listened in silence. I feel sorry for him, the colleague added. No, Sarah replied. I don't. She hung up and went to the kitchen, where Kira was engrossed in painting with watercolors. Her daughter looked up, smiled. Mommy, look. I drew a sun. Sarah hugged her, burying her face in her daughter's hair. Beautiful, she whispered. The most beautiful. Kira babbled about something of her own, smearing yellow paint on the paper. Sarah stroked her daughter's back and suddenly caught herself thinking. For the first time in many months, she could breathe easily.